Hello everyone. Welcome to our very first episode of Sweaty Casuals, brought to you by Snowflake Sanctuary Discord server. This is the podcast where we're going to be talking mostly about the state of gaming, offering our insights as the mild addicts that we are, and just having a general discussion about what's going on in certain things. My co-host Nox and myself, Zach, are joined today by Bandito, also known as LordBandito, but that's pretty damn pretentious, so we're going to keep calling him Bandito. As well as the ParadoxMuse, who we're going to call Paradox. And we're going to kind of discuss the current state of Overwatch 2 after 7 seasons of going through that. What's changed since the update to Overwatch 1, and what has and has not worked. A small reminder, we do swear, so viewer discretion is advised. And we're just going to go around, give a little intro, tell us about what role you play, what hero, or heroes you play. Yeah. So, Bandito, you want to get us started?
Sure. I don't mind. I can be best described as a perfect Icarus tale because I truly believe I could play about any role better than anybody else on my team. However, I am not every person on the team. So my main issue is staying quiet when other people are bitching. However, more recently, I have begun focusing on my tank and support roles. So that's what I jive with.
A lot of Reinhardt.
A little bit of Reinhardt. It's
W keys all the way.
It's fun when you don't have to care.
Always WM1.
You walk forward and destroy anything and everything that's in your way.
Paradox.
Sure. My background in this game is a little bit interesting, to say the least. I play somewhat. I played a lot more of Overwatch 1, especially more of like the beta, but I haven't played as much recently. My peak rank is not that high, but I mostly played like Orisa when I do end up playing Rhine, Roadhog, and then like Mei, Junkrat, and Moira, right? So I like to play pretty much any role. My actual role is I kind of work with collegiate esports, so somewhat like semi-professional tier 2 esports and everything. So I'm kind of in that scene, and yeah, I do a lot more with that.
So as I said, I'm Nox. I have an interesting introduction to Overwatch in which I came from console before being on mouse and keyboard. With that, I was never a awesome console player, so I played a lot of Mercy and Lucio to start my career because they were really easy. When I moved over to mouse and keyboard, though, I stuck with a support role. I now consider myself an Ana main. So I play a lot of Ana. I've played a lot of the newer supports in Kiriko and Iari. And then once we switched over to Overwatch 2 and the DPS queues weren't 20 minutes at a time, I did pick up my DPS as well. I enjoy long-range scope shooters, so things like Widow and Ashe, and a little bit of Soldier as well.
And then I go by Zachy Poo in most of the games that I play, but nobody calls me that because it's awkward. So I usually just go by Zach. I flex around. I usually am a tank flex. I mained Orisa Reinhardt back in the day, but now I jump between Orisa, Reinhardt, Zarya, Diva. A lot of Diva lately. Yeah, and I'll pitch in for DPS and support whenever I am asked to. So we're just gonna start by just a really quick little recap for all of us. So, when Blizzard came around and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this whole thing, and we're not gonna have Overwatch anymore. We're gonna do Overwatch 2," it was justified by this whole, hey, we're gonna redo our competitive. We're gonna turn us from an objective 5v5 game into a 6v6. It's always kind of had that classic niche as the only real FPS MOBA, and has tried to maintain that. They said, yeah, we're going to do some really big updates to our engine, and specifically one of the big things that they said they were going to do was, hey, we're going to make PvE. We're going to try not to delve too much into that topic, but it was a big justification for why they were going to make Overwatch 2 rather than continue Overwatch 1, and that should be mentioned. We're just going to quick run through the list of what changed. So big one was no more 6v6, it's 5v5. And with that, they were like, hey, tank's out. Tank's going to be completely different. Every tank got a rework. I think the only one who got slightly less than a rework was Hog, who they gave 100 extra health to and said, good enough.
And he suffered because of it. But...
And he suffered because of it until season 2, and then he was meta for too long. And then he got hard pushed into the ground, and now he's meta again. But that's a whole nother conversation. Crowd control changes were another really big one. They moved a lot of crowd control around, so tanks got more of it. Supports lost a lot of it. DPS lost all of it for a good time. That started to change, but we can get into that discussion in a bit. They removed the 2 CP game mode and added in the push maps. So now we have those, which are controversial in their own right. We finally started to get new heroes when Overwatch 2 released, because it had been almost over 3 years since Echo had been released at that time. Between when Echo got released and Overwatch 2 actually coming out, it was over 3 years. They introduced the Battle Pass, which we did want to discuss about. And I do want to mention, just from a quality of life thing, we got pings, which should just get mentioned, because it's a small feature, but it's something that gets used. And it's very valuable. So just to kind of get our ball rolling here, what has everybody's playing habits been since Overwatch 2 came out versus what they were in Overwatch 1?
Yeah, so Overwatch 1 was it was a silent joke along me and a lot of my friends that Overwatch was really the only game I played. I think my computer had 3 games on it, and one of them was Overwatch, the other one was like Star Wars Jedi, and something, maybe Among Us was the other one. So it was really all I played for a good amount of time. And I still remember the day that Overwatch 2 came out. I stayed home from classes. I was so pumped. I sat in a queue for 4 hours and then didn't get into the game before I had to go on to my next thing in life, which was an experience. But I was right on board when Overwatch 2 came out. I had both, I think, Season 1 and Season 2 Battle Passes completely finished. I played a lot. And then I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was the balance didn't feel good, or there was still too much negative press around it, or why. Maybe I found something better in other games. League took over, which is not a very proud thing for me to say. But I found the joy that I found in Overwatch in other games after a while, because it wasn't still there sparking. So I've been playing a little bit more recently. I can't remember the last time I really touched ranked. I don't think I've been ranked in the last 3 seasons in terms of my competitive stuff. I've been playing a lot of quick play when I have been playing, but it's been probably a good 3-4 months since I've been seriously playing Overwatch like hard like I used to.
Yeah, I'm in a similar but different situation. I used to play a lot when Overwatch got Game of the Year, so long ago. And then I dropped it because I had a very short attention span that Overwatch did not fulfill. Eventually, when I finally picked up PC and I started playing more computer-esque games, I brought it back up with a few friends and aggressively played it until Overwatch 2 released, to which I played into the ground nonstop for far too long. I think I've gotten every single battle pass so far that's been released. Also, not very proud of that one, but I do have it. However, recently I have rid myself of this sin. I have removed Overwatch from my computer. It is,
and this is not the first time you've done so.
No, but this one has a very specific reason, which we'll come back to.
I think this is the second or third. I'm hoping it'll last a little longer, but I've lost all appeal in Overwatch at the moment. So for me, there's no real reason for me to keep playing.
And your short attention span will bring it back someday.
Eventually. I'll get bored and one game just won't be enough.
I think that's kind of the idea for a lot of these games, is to give perfect frustration, right? And it's where, because these games can be pretty short, I think that's kind of the nice appeal of Overwatch versus League, where even myself, I don't necessarily have a lot of time to dedicate to these games just between my job and honestly because my work is related to competitive gaming, it's sometimes hard to go back to these games and play, right? Because I'm working, right? Half the time I'm working when I'm playing these games. And that sounds weird to say, but with something like Overwatch, it's nice because most of the games are typically 20 minutes or under 20 minutes. You can get that full game in. And even if you're losing or you lose the game, you go, "Aw, shucks." And then you just queue up another one, right? I do find myself that, for the past couple of years when Overwatch 2 first released, I really didn't play any competitive for the first couple of seasons. Even when Overwatch 1 was there, I played a little bit in 2019. I played most of my Overwatch in 2016 when it was released. And then now, past couple of months, I've actually been playing a decent amount. But when I play maybe 10 games at a time, and then I got to put it down, right? So it's kind of like get that fix, get that, it's like a little drug addict, right? You get that, nice little high for a couple hours, and then eventually you start losing, or eventually you're like, all right, this is now just too frustrating, and you have to put the game down. So,
what's your remedy for Apex? Watch the numbers go up and down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of competitive modes. I don't think I'm alone in saying that it is absolutely the dopamine rush of watching the number go up and down.
Yes and no.
I was also going to comment on the kind of 2-hour block or that certain amount of games that you get that fix in. I mean, Zach and I played the other day, and it was just the two of us, and we were in queue. And I think we got 6-7 games in, and I was having fun. It was the first time I'd played Overwatch in a long time. We were having a good time. We were winning some, losing some, but we found joy in it. But once I hit that wall, that like hour and a half, 2 hours, like it is one of those games that you just feel like at this point, I used to be able to sit and play it for hours on end, and now I can only do those like hour blocks to get that fix in.
Yeah, I'm definitely in a similar boat. I mean, Overwatch 1, used to just get on, go. God.
For too long.
Two of the three of you I used to sit in queues with for hours and hours and hours, and we'd just go. And we just keep going. And we had a blast. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that we have a good group of people, but on the flip side, like, we don't do that anymore. Some nights we're just gonna say, fuck it, we're gonna watch Hell's Kitchen.
We've talked about this a little bit. Do you think that because it's called Overwatch 2, that may have something to do with it psychologically? Had they just continued to call it Overwatch, make a lot of these significant changes, right? They add pings, they add new characters. Stylistically, it looks the same. Let's pretend that it still stylistically looks exactly like Overwatch 1, right? Yep. Do you think they still go down to 5 heroes, right? Do you think that would like still give that rush to you, or do you think that, there was almost too many changes and that's kind of what's killed it a little bit?
I have my own personal feelings, but I do want to touch on, you and I have had a lot of deep discussions about this, and you and I had them before it became Overwatch 2. You and I had them back when it was still Overwatch 1. We were talking about the fact that the game was dying. And it was a very simple issue to point out. It was the fact that the game hadn't been updated in years. I think there was one patch in 2023 total. 2020, 2022. 2022.
Yeah.
Point being that there was only one patch, and it was basically like it was a bug patch. It was the tiniest little bug patch that was offered, and it was because there was something like actually game breaking. And other than that, we were just sitting there on a game that was just dying, and it was still a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredibly fun, but there were changes that needed to get made. And a lot of it had to do with the monetization of the game. And, we were going to talk about this later, but maybe we should just go into that, which is, Overwatch 1 was a freaking fantastic deal.
Mm-hmm.
You could go buy Game of the Year edition, $30. You never had to spend another dime on it. Mm-hmm. Every single thing that ever came in the game, for the most part, you could go get it for free. I'm trying to think, what did you have to pay for? Pink Mercy skin when that was available?
If you wanted it.
If you wanted it. but you didn't. Everybody was on the same competitive playing field. It was
Yeah, the only
purely
money
that
you would
cosmetic.
spend was cosmetics, loot boxes. Let's not forget I haven't thought about loot boxes in months, but those things were always so exciting, especially during events. Like,
With that hit of dopamine.
But even if you didn't want to spend money, if you just kept playing the game, you'd still get rewarded.
Mhm.
And I mean, so this sounds really bad, but even, I think I was playing a couple days ago at this point. How do you get gold now? Because I went to go look to get the new characters because I actually haven't purchased any of the new characters, and that's something you have to do now. Like, how do you get gold besides just spending money in this game?
I think they added a new currency.
They have
Like,
two currencies now.
It's completely separate now. I think it's all purchase for the gold credits.
Right.
Yep.
So then what's the point of spending time in the game?
So you can
Isn't
still
there
unlock
some
the characters if you play the
Okay.
game. There's challenges for them. There is a way to do it. It's just the truth of the matter is that new players aren't incentivized to go get it because they're already at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, they're going to have the classic roster forever. They're going to have it's all of those in the first 3 heroes from Overwatch 2, I think.
Yeah.
But even when you have a new player now, I mean, we didn't even talk or add on the list the new player orientation. I don't think any of us have had to do it, so there's not a good perspective to add on it. But as someone who's had friends that I've brought to the game and they've had to go through it, they only get 3 characters when they start. Like,
really?
Yeah.
It's like Soldier Reaper and
they slowly introduce you to new characters that they deem are the best introduction to the game.
Which, to be fair, Soldier is the best introduction.
Yeah.
If you just need to pick up one character and kind of get an understanding of just what's going on in the game, Soldier's a great way to do it because his kit it's Call of Duty. You're playing Call of Duty.
Well, and I think too, like one of the draws to Overwatch when I first started playing was that you had so many characters to choose from and learn. And I think that there is value into introducing new players to a certain character that has an easy kit, easy to play. What's the phrasing? It's the low skill floor, high skill ceiling kind of thing, easy to do. And expanding from there, but I think bringing new players in and saying you have to play this many games to get the full roster, I think they don't know what they're playing for yet. They don't know these characters that they could be playing because they're only exposed to the first 5 or 3 or whatever.
I would be curious if they can go on the training range and play them because even when new heroes get added now, like I don't have Mauga unlocked. I haven't paid for the battle pass this season, nor do I think I will. But you can go play them on the training range.
And I do think that is true now that I think about it.
Which is better than nothing, but the fact that if that's not mentioned in new player orientation, it really should be.
How would you know?
Yeah. You're not incentivized to go look for it.
I like the idea of a new player orientation. I will be honest, because whenever you talk to anybody who you're trying to introduce, because let's be honest, like Overwatch is a MOBA FPS game, right? It is a combination of those two genres essentially. That's the idea behind Overwatch, and what made it unique is that, it takes 2 beloved genres at the time because League of Legends was at its peak right around there and match them together, right? And so when you introduce somebody, especially when you throw somebody into League and you say, all right, here's 150 characters, good luck, right? And that's insanely intimidating. So what does the game do? They give you a choice of what they decide to be the easiest characters in those instances. You get like Caitlyn and Miss Fortune and Lux. I know, Nox, you're shaking your head because you know these characters, but I know the other 2 may not. But basically, same concept, right? It's the easy characters. They're giving you the characters that, most people can play simply, right? Or be effective on simply for the most part. So,
yeah. And I think that's an interesting point, given that I started playing League 3 months ago.
Yeah.
So I didn't even think about it from that way of like, I was that new player in a new game and how that helped me in terms of like, oh, I learned how to play on Lux, and then I learned how to play on Tristana, and learned from there, and now I play other heroes, and the roster's not as scary anymore as it used to be. But I also do think that the difference between League and Overwatch, if we're going to compare like a new player to those, is League, there is so much more than the character's abilities. that goes into the game. There's items, there's how you play the game, there's different strategies. Now I know that all kind of does play into Overwatch, but in terms of picking up a game and being introduced to those 30 characters in Overwatch can, instead of the hundreds of characters in League and everything that goes into them, I think is a different experience.
Absolutely. And something else, like even talking about League, like you can play Lux support or you can play Lux mid, right? There's, you can actually flex some of these characters into these different roles, but Soldier is a DPS character. Orisa is a main tank.
And Overwatch League is like, oh no, he's like a half support.
Yeah, exactly. But
yeah, we have to buff his heal pad.
Yeah, we have to buff. Moira is a DPS support, basically, right? Like, for what we're looking at. But it's
Yari, Ana. Let's go down the line.
You're still siloed, right? It is all of them. You get 2 support slots.
Mercy.
And you have to play support in those roles typically. So yeah, I mean they're different. It's more of the concept of like introducing new players, especially people to their first competitive game, can be intimidating, right? And even thinking back to Overwatch, had I not played League before Overwatch, coming into Overwatch when I saw these new characters, it's like, yes, I wanted to try them all because I was already used to the competitive aspect, and it was just okay, let me play these characters. But when you have some of these new players where now there's so many other competitive games that are vying for people's attention, it can be challenging to kind of introduce somebody to Overwatch if they see 40 characters that they have to learn and they just say, well, they shut down there, I'm not going to learn them, right? Unless they're really, really dedicated. So I don't know. I like the idea of having less characters, but there needs to be a simple, easy way to unlock characters, especially in a game, any of those games where, like, I did play a game, like I said, 2 days ago, and I had the new, I'm going to call him Maui. That may be racist, I'm not sure, but like I played against Maui, right? And
Maui.
It's so close.
Mauga? Sure,
Yeah.
Maui. And he absolutely destroyed me, right? I had no clue what he did. I had no understanding of what he did. And I was like, this character's insane. Like, again, it was this new introduction to this character, but it really made me upset because, again, I was like, oh, I want to go play him. And then that's when I found out that oh, that's right, I have to buy the characters now. So I was trying to figure out a way to unlock them, and I was like, I got frustrated, getting my ass beat by him, and so I was just like, I'm just going to sign off for the day, right? And so it's interesting to kind of hear that there isn't an easy way for me to get to play him.
He got nerfed today.
Ah, good.
Really? That didn't take long.
It's been a week. I mean,
yeah.
He'd pop a corner, and then he's just machine gunning me, and it's like, what do I do, right? And again, I could have go and watch a video, right? But I think this group also has some interesting perspectives because we're all older than the 16 to 18 range, which a lot of these competitive games.
Well,
no,
Bandito's 18.
Most,
and
I had no idea.
Not just graduated college. They're all younger than you and I.
Damn.
As much as I love the title of old, I don't think it quite applies just yet.
Still. Okay, fine. So at least you can kind of change that perspective, but like
a little.
For me, we talk about this meme all the time too in the realm of like, if you are at the upper level in certain games, you're just getting beat down by the 16-year-old who finished his homework after an hour and now he's just playing Overwatch for the rest of the night, right? And it's like, I don't have time to go look up Maui, right? And I'm going to keep calling him that because that's what it is. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. It's more entertaining than anything.
I know. It might as well. But like, I play the game and it's like, now I got to go watch a video to figure out how to beat this character or just keep playing and get beat down and like maybe a week later figure out how to play the character. So it's, I don't know. It's in a frustrating state because it's such a unique game.
So
I'm gonna bring in. We have one other person who's asked to join us today. So
really
fun.
Hello, Oreo. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi. Scared the crap out of me.
You're welcome. So we were actually just discussing how Overwatch is such a unique game, but how all the new heroes is really intimidating to get brought in on, and new player orientation is something that we're not really experienced with. But like, how do you even do that?
You were talking earlier about how Mauga was problematic. I stopped playing right after his like free release weekend was, so I got to experience the kind of character he would be. I played him a good bit. I still have no fucking idea how his kit works. I have no clue. I don't know what's going on.
He plays like a
I
hog.
know it's working.
Yeah.
He plays like a roadhog. He doesn't tank in the traditional sense of I'm going to mitigate damage. He does it by the I'm going to get shot, and their people are going to have to use their abilities in order to stop me from doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's awful to play against. Because the truth of the matter is that like Reinhardt has what, like almost twice his health pool? I'm gonna have to look it up.
Well, he needs it.
He
At
does
this
need
point.
it. But the truth of the matter is that because Reinhardt has no self-healing, Reinhardt doesn't last as long, even though he has a 1200 HP barrier.
Yeah, he's got 500 health. Because I pulled up his stats, because I'm now actually like, I haven't had the chance to go look at a video. Let me go finally pull up what he does. But it's like, all right, he's got 500 health, 150 armor. Okay.
He heals it back so fast it doesn't matter.
If he crits, he heals it back, so he's incentivized to,
Hit shots.
Yeah.
I also think that Overwatch, just as a blanket statement about the new characters that they've been releasing, I think this is what's going to happen to any game, that when you get this roster that's this size, you have characters like Soldier and Reaper that have very basic kits because they were some of the first characters. They now have to go bigger and better and more flashy every time they create a new character because it has to do something new.
Mm-hmm.
So then you start getting into these characters like Mauga, or I'm thinking about Iari, that have these such complex, different kits that do wild things that make the game feel weird or terrible to play against, because we're used to, okay, Soldier comes out. He has a gun that feels like Call of Duty. He has a heal pad and a Helix rocket. And he can run really fast. Sounds great.
They don't call him legs for nothing.
Kiriko can do this amazing crit damage. She has these knives. The Suzu, she can teleport. She can climb walls. She can do A, B, and C. And it starts to make some of these older characters feel so basic. And these guys feel so extravagant. And I think that's just what happens when you have new characters. But I think that's creating these kits that are so loud and annoying to play against.
And that's an
Yes
endemic.
and no.
Go ahead.
I think some of them, they have to keep innovating. They have to keep finding ways to keep the game interesting. Like, that's never going to be a problem. I think the bigger issue comes in the fact that the balance philosophy has changed. So when Overwatch 2 first came out, and we did see this with Ramatra in particular. I'd say with Ramatra and with Junker Queen. Although Junker Queen was a little bit of a weird situation because she kind of came out in the beta. But Ramatra in particular, where they were saying, yeah, we're going to introduce heroes, and then as they come into the game and we start to see how they're performing, then we're going to start to try and buff them to try and get to a level where they're going to be more viable. And they might come in and they might be a little less than perfect, but we're going to try and bump them to that point. And Lifeweaver, I think, was the one that kind of changed that in particular, because he came out and he was awful. Like, his kit seemed stupid, ridiculous, and then people actually started using him, and he didn't do anything.
No, wasn't enough.
And
he's more there for the memes now.
Oh yeah, Leaf Blower is definitely there for the memes.
Lifeweaver.
He just yoinking your teammate out of the
uppies.
Battle uppies.
And it's sad because his kit is interesting, but the truth of the matter is, like, even now, he doesn't have a massive impact. He's there as a heal bot now. That is what he does.
There's no utility to him. And his utility isn't useful.
Yep. And then since then, we've gotten Iari and now Mauga, and you know, Iari came in strong and she's had to get nerfed. Mauga's come in strong and he's had to get nerfed.
And that's a it's a game design philosophy. We see this across other competitive games. You know, I hate to bring up League of Legends again, but at least I have somebody else here who can talk about League with me. There's a new character that literally just got released in League. His name is Hui, right?
Yeah, I think.
And to put it in Overwatch terms, if he presses Q then E, he does something, but if he presses E then Q, he does something else. And he can also do like Q and R and he does something, and E and R and then does something else. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so imagine here. I know what you're talking about because I've seen this. Imagine. Okay, so Soldier, for example. We'll stick with there. He's got 3 abilities, right? He's got legs, he's got heel pad, he's got helix rocket. Now, every time, instead of those just being an ability, that's a category that you press. So you have category 1, 2, and 3. So when you press category 1, now category 1 spawns 3 different abilities. So instead of 3 abilities, he has 9. That's this new League character. Yeah. And a reason I have not touched him, because what?
Exactly. And it's pushing design elements in a lot of these games that, you know, the previous coding we couldn't necessarily do. You look at the original roster of characters in Overwatch, and a lot of them were not very complex. What honestly would be the first complex Overwatch character that you would kind of look at? Like really, really complex. Like Zenyatta, maybe on release, was probably the most complex that we got.
Actually,
right?
You know what? Release Torb.
Release Torb? Yep. To be
Release
like
Torb was
super efficient.
Pretty complex.
On Release Torb, and maybe Release Zenyatta, right? But other than that, like the base characters for Overwatch are pretty simple, right?
Yeah, but I also I feel like Overwatch was more so a game to bring new people into the gaming community rather than take old gamers that are already know what they're doing and how to run these complex characters into the game, even though they still play and they have their own ranks and stuff. But that's why they were all like somewhat simplistic.
Exactly. And like, it's also part of it is a design philosophy, right? Like as time goes on, we start putting more and more time into these characters, and we have a better understanding of what our general gamers can figure out, right? The first person who's able to figure out Malga, and the first player that's able to figure out, you know, any of these newer characters, they're going to have a strict advantage over just any of the other players, because you have me who has no idea what he's doing, right? So I'm just going to get creamed on it. And then, you know, you have like someone else who's just already figured out these efficiencies, right? When I talk to some of my students, that's what they're known for, is they just full grind. My main flex support person, his name's Neb, I'll bring him up. He grinded Kiriko the minute she came out. He was like, this character, she's awesome, right? I love the design, I love the idea behind it. He only played Kiriko, and I'm pretty sure he like skipped class to go to just play Kiriko, right? Like just a normal thing. He was quickly number 1 on the character, and he was just absolutely rolling over people. Now though, like he's not considered the best Kiriko. Other OWL players have figured out the efficiencies. Other players have figured out efficiencies. So like over time, it takes that time to get those characters to figure out like where they are and how strong they can actually be. But now it even sounds like you guys are also experiencing the other side of a lot of the games, where what Riot has done, even with Valorant, and they've done this with League for years too, is whenever a new character is released, they're typically up here. Out of the last 15 League characters that have released, they've always been instantly meta-defining, instantly needing nerfs, where League never did hot fixes. Out of the last 15 characters, they had 5 characters that were hot fixed, right? So day 1, day 2 on release, they instantly get nerfed. And this is a community that has a beta, has a PBE, right? Same thing with Valorant. Their last 4 characters, 2 of them were hot fixed on day 1, or some statistic like that, right? It sounds like that's what's happening with Overwatch now, with Malga. If he's already being nerfed, it's been a week, right? At most.
1 week.
And he's nerfed? That's insane.
And I think that started with Overwatch too. Because I remember when they had the beta, and the beta was what it was. But the minute beta 2 came out and you had creators talking about it and people, it was a little bit harder to get into, if I remember correctly. You had to like do something to get a code for it. I don't know. But I remember by the time beta 2 came out, they had already made changes to Sojourn. They had already made changes to Junker Queen. I think she was live during the second one, that they were looking into that. And every time it seems like since Overwatch 2 has come out, when they've released a new character, by the next week, like they've done today with Mauga, there is an amount of patch notes to either nerf or buff that character. And I think it's coming from a place of them going, well, you guys wanted more patches. You guys wanted all of this. So I think it's them staying active with it, which is good that they're paying attention to the game. But I think it's also different. We're coming from a game that was dying. And so we're getting characters that are getting fixed and changed. And it's a different experience.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's possibly even more than that, because there's these hidden elements to it, and a lot of it has to just be with the fact that Blizzard isn't forthcoming with information. Sojourn was meta the day she came out. Junker Queen was meta the day she came out. Sojourn, they didn't take any time to fix. Sojourn was broken through halfway through season 2? No, all the way through season 2 into season 3. And it was really problematic, because even when they did nerf her, they didn't go and say, oh, how much damage does she do with a Mercy Pocket? And she was still problematic with a Mercy Pocket, and then they had to go nerf her again. Whereas Junker Queen, they knew that she wasn't overpowered because they were playing with Kiriko. And the truth of the matter is that Junker Queen's ultimate is really powerful if there's no Kiriko. But if there's a Kiriko, it's like damn near useless.
Yeah.
So not being able to work with the whole information, and they've also had this very numbers-based philosophy when it comes to balancing. They're not actually paying attention to how people play the game, how those characters are played. One thing that comes to mind is Sombra had her big rework. It's been a little while now. It's been a little over a month, I think. Something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Give or take.
And I have to wonder if... I don't think I'm alone in saying she feels incredibly oppressive.
Yeah.
As in her current state. She's absolutely awful to play against. I appreciate the fact that they have solved some of the issues with her. It doesn't feel like a throw pick. It doesn't feel like somebody who's playing their own game when you have a Sombra on your team. It feels like they're actually involved in team fights. They're getting in, they're doing damage. But, God, it is absolutely awful to play against. And, playing against a good Sombra in Overwatch 1 was not a fun experience. Playing against a good Sombra in Overwatch 2 when it first came out and before her rework was not a fun experience. But you had plenty of matches where you ran into these fair fights and you actually felt like you had a chance. And a lot of matches now, it doesn't feel like it's a fair fight because you have a character who is so mobile, who is getting around, who is picking off whoever she chooses in whatever manner she chooses. And the truth of the matter is you have to treat her like a Bastion. Where as soon as you see that turret form, everybody either gets out of the way or immediately bursts them down. And there's no in between because you can't stand in the way of it. And it's the type of character balance philosophy that, right now they haven't changed her. She has not gotten a single change since she got released. And I have to wonder if they're looking at the win rate and saying, oh, well, her win rate right now is 58% or something like that. And the reason that it's 58% is because, in 3/4 of matches where a Sombra gets used, the other team ends up swapping to a Sombra, so you get a win and a loss. And it ends up balancing out. Because it does seem like they're balancing purely on numbers and not actually on feel at this point.
Which is so funny that you say that they're balancing on numbers, because if they're balancing on numbers, don't you think they'd notice that a Sojourn with a Mercy Pocket was still game breaking?
You'd think.
Like,
you would think.
They don't look at those numbers.
Like,
There's
I
only
think
certain
like
numbers they look at.
yes, I agree. I think they do focus a lot on numbers. A lot of the reasons that they've making their balance changes within the patch notes have to do with numbers. Like, that's just what they do. I get it. But there comes And I look at Blizzard in a few other places other than just balance patches and go, like, what are you actually talking about sometimes? Like, what are we actually doing? Because they've been better about communication. And is it Aaron Keller? Am I right? Has been doing all his blogs. They're great. I'm glad that we have it. It feels more like a community than it ever has in ways like that. But we get to the point where they're like, yeah, we're being super open and this is how we're balancing. But you're not. Because we're missing things like a mercy pocket multiplier, which should not be new news to anybody. It happened to Ashe. Ashe was broken in Overwatch 1 when she had a mercy pocket. There was a reason her damage got changed.
Yep.
So it's like I don't accept this. Mercy pocket. Like, you knew. You had to have known. It's your game. You've been balancing it for years. Like, but
I've kind of grown out of it because as much as I adore my high-tech first-person rock, paper, scissors, that's all it is. It is
they changed
high-tech first-person rock, paper, scissors. It's better, don't get me wrong. It was definitely worse at the beginning of Overwatch 2 when they first switched over. It was all, oh, they're playing that character, I'll play this character, and we win. And you just kept going in a circle until you had one person who it didn't matter what he chose, he won. Yeah. And then that person would skyrocket you to the top, speaking from experience.
I think a lot of those issues have actually been fixed for the most part on most roles, with one exception. Let's talk about tank for a bit.
I was about to transition there because I wanted to pose the question to you guys. Do you guys miss having two tanks?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
See,
Paradox, I'm curious on your thoughts on this one.
Again, other people go, and I'll.
Okay,
mine's going to lead into a completely different conversation, so other people go for it.
Five-person teams make sense. That's how it is with a lot of, team-based games, just in general. So it just makes sense for, especially if you're going, like how we talked about earlier, how Overwatch is like a starter game, almost. If you're going from that to another game, it's an easy transition. I play tank 90% of the time, right? So, like, it's fun to have I'm the only tank and like I can go in and have my big dick energy and run around and do my thing, right? But that also gets killed by the fact that, oh yeah, I'm the only tank. I have to take on all these other roles instead of like the main and off tank, where you had one tank really protecting your team and the other that would do damage all the time and like basically act like a DPS in a sense, right? So like you have to the swap was hard to like manage for tank mains, I feel like, especially off tank mains, because like me, I played a lot of Diva and Zarya and some Hog, like all off tanks, right? Like their main goal is killing the other team and making space, whereas Reinhardt and like Orisa, when she had her shield and stuff, like their job was to keep their team safe, right? So trying to like figure out that whole balance is super weird, but also like I don't know, I love being the only tank and everybody taking care of me as I do my psychopathic tendencies of my big dick hammer swing or whatever. Like it's a lot of fun, but it's very, very different.
I think for tank it impacted negatively because now it's all your fault. If you don't play your role how you're supposed to play, your entire team loses. And
there's no backup.
There's no backup. It's your fault. You have to buck up and get your shit done. However, it also, at the same time, removed a lot of shitty tank combinations that genuinely pissed off, I think, every single person who has ever played. What was the Japanese map? The Hanzo's one. Hanamura. Fucking, you can either, one of two options, Reinhardt and Zarya, where he was immortal, just going forward, fucking shit up, or you went double shield and you sat like a bitch in a corner and did nothing all game.
With the Bastion.
and they couldn't do anything because you can't die. It was ridiculous. I'm glad that that's gone. However, now it's all your problem. Don't fuck up, or else your entire team will suffer for it.
I'm gonna throw out there. I think that particular one is that was just 2CP was a flawed
mess
game mode. You know, it had its interesting moments. Like there were some maps that were enjoyable. I know, a lot of people enjoyed Volskaya. A lot of people enjoyed Anubis.
I like Anubis.
The bunker cops were became as soon as Bastion came out, became the meta for any of those, and Bastion in particular was the one who enabled so many bad issues, and it was why he got reworked for Overwatch 2. And his rework was good.
Yeah.
His rework is, he still has the threat. You have to respect the turret. If you don't respect the turret form, then you're gonna die. You are gonna get sent back to your spawn room, and you're gonna have to go deal with that. But on the flip side, he's not so oppressive that there's not ways to play around it.
Before Paradox takes off and answers this question, because I also do want to hear the answer, I still remember one of the most interesting byproducts of having less tanks was one of the big gripes from Overwatch 1 was that the game ran on support ultimates and how fast they were able to charge their ultimates because there were 2 tanks. There were 2 high HP heroes running around that they could just stick Ana's gun up their butt, and all of a sudden she's got nano every 30 seconds. And as a support player who was used to having nano every 30 seconds, learning how to play support around 1 tank was a lot different because those support ults weren't charged as fast as they used to be. And that was the one thing I wanted to add because I remember that being a big change going into Overwatch 2.
Paradox, I'm going to let you take this one, and then I'll chime in with my thoughts.
So I think a lot of the points I was going to make, or a good number of the points have been made, which big one, going from 6 to 5, from a business perspective, I know I've mentioned this to you countless number of times. If I'm building an esports arena, if I'm building something out from a business perspective, I need 2 extra computers just to run my Overwatch team, right? And that's an issue. If just, again, I'm 2 extra people, I have 2 extra employees that I now need to hire if I'm, playing on a team or if I'm an owner of a team or anything like that. It makes a lot
Overwatch
more.
League is dead.
What?
Overwatch League is dead.
Well,
Overwatch League was never alive.
And
it had a moment. It had its moment.
That could be another discussion. But
yeah.
Again, if I'm building a stage, I have to keep in mind that I'm going to need 6 people. It's why you actually see some of these other games that if they have more than 5 people, they're just not getting built out, right? It doesn't make any sense. So, Rocket League being 3, League being 5, Valorant being 5, it makes a lot of sense. Go down to 5. Boom, right? Makes sense. The tank role being the person that gets cut also made sense. It was the role that basically had the longest queues. It's the role that not a lot of people wanted to play. Why? Because most people wanted to play off tank if they did want to play a role, right? That's just the way that it works, right? So it makes a lot of sense to remove that role, but at the same time, it's very, very difficult to balance around 1 tank. The game and the way the characters were designed is not made to go around 1 particular tank and 1 particular role. If you look at these other games and you look at other MOBAs, again, other MOBAs, there's 5 roles, right? And each of those characters play a particular role within each of those 5 roles. If you look at Valorant, right, there's basically 4 roles, and then your 5th role is a flex. Do you need more smokes because you need more smokes for that map? Do you need another duelist because that map has like long sights, right? So for Overwatch, I think what I would want to see is another change as the roster continues to delve and you move into having 5 unique roles. And, this is my flex DPS player. They're going to pick a flex DPS, right? Because that was kind of one of the problems with having 2 tanks, having 2 DPS is it's like, well, we have no damage. And it's may not be because your DPS were bad. It may be because you had like Tracer and, I don't know, Reaper, right? You had no headshot. Or, hey, we have no healing because we have a Baptiste and, I don't know, a Moira, right? Or a Zenyatta and a Moira, right? Like 2 low heal, or we have too much healing and we don't have enough damage. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of these combinations in this game because the roles are almost too broad right now, right? Having 3 roles. Something else that could be interesting with Overwatch. and I know you've been playing Apex a lot, is to go down to 3. Have 1 tank, 1 DPS, and 1 support. Buff the DPS, buff the supports to kind of be at that level of the tank, right? Have it as 3v3. The tank is mainly, guarded as trying to keep alive, right? Or like protect the DPS and the support. The DPS is either looking for sites or looking to just duel. And then you have the supports there that are just kind of healing, right? I think you could potentially solve a lot of those problems moving all the way down to 3, or some of the weird problems moving down to 3.
I think going down to 3 would be problematic just because, the maps are built around... Their maps were built around 6, and the fact that they're even still mostly functional for 5 is, a testament to a lot of the map design. Like, we've had some rough maps in Overwatch, but the truth be told, there are some excellent map designs. We will all sing the praises of King's Row until the end of time, because it probably is one of the greatest maps out there. It does all the things it needs to do, and it does it very well. And neither side of the, that's a hybrid map, so you have to capture a point and then escort a payload through it. But you don't feel disadvantaged on being on either side of that. It's purely the teams fighting against each other. It's not you guys fighting against the map. The other thing is, I think if you went down to 3, you're losing a lot of what makes Overwatch special and unique. And, you'd have to buff your DPS, you'd have to buff the supports, or you'd have to dumb down your tanks. And I think it would make for just a much less dynamic game.
You would have to have significant changes, don't get me wrong, right? Obviously, there were significant changes going from 6 to 5, imagine 5 to 3, right?
Absolutely.
The changes are almost like unimaginable, but if you're going to keep those 3 roles, right, you kind of need like 1, 1, and 1, because again, unless you're playing at that owl level, that tier 2 level, it's so hard to get individuals to basically be like, okay, you're going to pick this role and this role. Even on the teams that I have, my main roster, we still have a main tank player and an off tank player, right? Riker is my main tank and Iron is my off tank, right? That's just the roles, right? They still need to fill out those roles because, again, if Winston was meta like he was for most of the college season this year, I'm going to go with Riker. He's one of the best Winstons that we have. If Sigma was meta, we have to go with him. But Zarya started creeping up on certain maps. There were certain maps that, other tanks started creeping up. So it's like we still had to keep both of those players, even though we're down to 5 people, right? So it's hard, because you don't see that in other MOBA games. You don't even see that in Valorant, where it's like, oh, okay, you're the best Sage. Like, I'm keeping you on my roster because you're the best Sage, and if I need a Sentinel, I'm going to put you in, right, for this particular map. Or if I need 2 Sentinels, we'll put you in, versus, oh, you just play Sentinel, right? Like, that's the role you support, basically, Valorant, right? Overwatch is so different, and I'm not actually 100% sure why. Right? There seems to be a lot of specialist players in this game, at least from my perspective, that there are people who, I'm one trick tracer, and it's like we can play a tracer comp, right? And if it works, it works. And it's going to work, and you're pretty much going to pub stomp anyone who's lower than you. When you get to those upper echelons, it's, do you know how to counter tracer comps? Well, if you don't, I win. If you do, I'm probably going to lose, right? So, and if she's meta, it's a completely different story. Again, going back to this season and trying to compare it, at one point, Bastion with what was meta? It was Bastion and 2 other characters that also were super, super meta. And I can't think of them. It might have been like Bastion, Sig, and something else, right? Or it was fast rotating with Symmetra, I think. Like fast rotating your Bastion to Symmetra, and then the Bastion just rolls it over. One school has literally the best Bastion in tier 2. They went from like barely being top 8 to being top 4. As soon as Bastion got nerfed, they dropped down to like top 10, top 12 again, right? And it was just this huge volatility because they would just play. That's all they knew how to do. Play Bastion comp. That's it. That's all we're going to do. When you have these variations within these roles, it's so hard to kind of balance around these characters, because if you... I don't know. it's so, this still stems back to the one tank problem. Right? Because at least with the, having two tanks, I have multiple. I could run two main tanks if that was what countered your comp. I could run, two off tanks if that's what countered your comp at the time, right? Diva Zarya was meta at one point, right? But now, if my tank is getting countered, it's kind of over because I only have this one tank, right? Where if my DPS get countered, maybe my supports get countered. It doesn't really matter if my tank's getting countered, right? It's completely over because I only have this one tank. So I don't know. Overall, I think it's good that they moved to 5, but the balance still it's not there. It's just not.
And I definitely agree. So my thoughts on this are actually pretty straightforward. I think when they made the move to 5, there were 2 problems. So one, there was the obvious number problem, which I don't think has been solved. I don't think that the numbers make sense right now, and I think given the fact that supports are so freaking broken right now, that's pretty obvious. Like, and also like, there's a time to kill. There's an amount of time that it takes for any hero to burst down another target. And in Overwatch 1, it took a couple seconds, and it wasn't because the healing was super overbuffed. It was because damage output was a lot lower. And in general, we've seen Overwatch 2, those numbers have just gone through the roof, particularly on the support role. I mean, Baptiste, Iari, Kiriko does 120 on a headshot. Why does she need to 2-tap people? Like, I get the fact that she needs to be able to defend herself. Fine. She also has a teleport ability. She has a literal whole move slot. An entire ability slot devoted to the fact that she needs to get away. She does not need to output that much damage. If you want her to have more survivability, lower the damage output and just lower her cooldown on teleport. I'd much rather deal with a hero who teleports around than one who just turns around and does whatever they do damn well please.
Because I think that turns Kiriko into a support hero with utility, not a support hero that does DPS. Like, I think that's what's kind of missing the mark on some of these new support heroes and how they're changing and buffing them, is that they're just DPS. They're DPS who have an ability to heal their teammates around them, instead of being a support. And I know there was that whole thing about healers versus support, and it's going to forever be the debate. But the point is that they all have... Yes. And I think the point is that
they supports, not healers.
They all have the utility to stay alive, to be able to survive, to be able to support their teammates in different ways. That's why, I know we talked about Lifeweaver a little bit. His kit's not great, but he has that utility. Kiriko's teleport has that utility. Anna's sleep dart has that utility. Bap's immortality field has that utility. But why is Bap just Soldier 76 with a burst gun and an immort field? Kiriko can do 120 damage on a headshot. Iari uses the literal power of the sun to kill people around her. Like, they don't need to... As much as I love... I'm a support player. I love it. It's fun. I have a good time whenever I go play. But I know I'm making the game oppressive for those around me.
Absolutely. I think the other component of it is twofold, and it just has to do with how you play tank. So, one, there was a really clear defining of roles in Overwatch 1, where you did have a main tank and an off tank. Your main tank goes and makes space, your off tank goes and enforces it. Your main tank is Reinhardt. He's going to be the guy who swings the hammer and makes the space so your team can move forward. And when he gets pressured by the enemy team, your Zarya says, no, you're stopping here. Here's a bubble. You can't do what you want to do. And if you're going to try to do it, I'm going to shoot back at you. You have that give and take. Overwatch 2, we don't have that. You have a tank who has to go and be in 2 places at once, who has to go make space, and then has to go back, defend the space. And a lot of DPS who have been playing for a long time and have gotten good at those heroes don't understand that their job now isn't just, hey, I need to go get a pick. Your job is also, hey, you need to fall back and help your supports. hey, your tank's health is getting low. You need to go help him out. You know, it has always been a team-based game, and it feels like a lot of the changes that have been made haven't been communicated to player communicating well to players so that they understand that they can't play the same. And I think you do see a line where Bandito, I know you've started to get to that upper line of like high plat, low diamond, where you do start to see where people start acting very differently.
They'll start trying.
They'll start trying, but also you'll see, you know, you'll have DPS players who will say, hey, you know, I could go chase that kill, but no, I'm actually going to go help my support who's getting flanked right now because that's more valuable. And there's an understanding that they don't just have one job. They have to help do many of the other things because the off tank was eliminated as a role, essentially. The other thing I think that comes out of that, though, is that tanks are, you know, my main, the reason I'm a main flex tank is because there's too many situations where my ability to make space and enforce it is being totally dictated by what the enemy team has chosen and the ability of the rest of my team to help deal with that. You know, if there is a Pharah flying around and my DPS cannot help with that, my best option is to go D.Va. D.Va is the one who puts the most pressure on Pharah as a tank player. And if I do that and they're playing Zarya, I'm immediately at a disadvantage. And I need some help picking up that slack. Or I need to go deal with the Zarya. I need to go Winston, for example. But now I can't help with the Pharah. And so there's always going to be this constant rock, paper, scissors, and there's not really a good way to get around that right now. The truth of the matter is that there are so many tanks that get hard countered by one thing or another. Doomfist is a great example. Doomfist really, really gets in the way of a lot of tanks because of the fact that he has so much mobility and so much survivability, and there's really not great ways to deal with him. And I feel like they keep falling, the designers of Overwatch in particular, keep falling this pitfall where they design one or two heroes and say this is going to be the counter for like 3 or 5 different things. And that's when things become oppressive. Look at Sombra right now. Sombra counters every single tank in the game. Because the truth of the matter is that tanks right now need their abilities to survive. And as soon as you take it away, even if it's only for a second, they really can't do their job. Look at Kiriko. Suzu has been overpowered since the day it came out. Being able to clear antis, great ability. Phenomenal from a gameplay standpoint. Because the truth of the matter was, Ana's grenade was very powerful. It was incredibly powerful, and having counterplay to that was great. Why does it wake people up from Shatter? Why does it stop Gravflux? There's so many things that it does that it doesn't need to do. But it's because they said, oh, well, it would be great if it could do this, or we had something that could do this. Oh, just add it on there.
Unfortunately, I do have to drop off. But, you know, to even kind of talk about that, it comes from like a lack of definition of what the roles are really, really supposed to do. Because you do have the characters like Kiriko, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you do want to make unique characters. Kiriko is very unique, and you know Moira is really, really unique. That's why I love the character, right?
I think the amount of Rule 34 has said that in terms of just straight character design, they have done phenomenal.
Thanks.
We really didn't need that.
Didn't need that.
We
But regardless, right? But Kiriko's this DPS support, which is the flex support role, right? Versus, and Moira's, again, that DPS support. Brig is, again, like a tank support, right? You do have Soldier, which we already said is a DPS support, right? You do have these secondary roles that these characters play, and they move across in kind of these different areas across the spectrum. But again, if I'm choosing Soldier, like I'm losing out on so much because I am playing this DPS support. If I'm choosing Moira, it's like I have to go this other, like I can't go Kiriko, right? Because I'm not going to have enough healing. If I choose Baptiste, I have to go, you know, typically like Lucio, right? But if I'm going Lucio, like I have to go, like another DPS support, right? So it's a weird decision in terms of balance, just having these characters kind of across the spectrum, but still forcing them to be in certain roles. You have a lot of DPS players right now in Owl that are switching to flex support specifically to play Kiriko. Like that's the only reason that they're switching to flex support is they're playing Kiriko, and then they're like learning BAP, and that's it. And congratulations, you're now an Owl tier flex support, because all the flex supports in Owl were kind of meh time, and now it's like, okay, you already have the aim skills from DPS. We're just switching you now to the role that's going to have more impact anyways, and you're still dealing more damage. So it's a weird design choice, just with a lack of definition. So with that, I am dropping off. So
thanks again so much
Thank you for
Paradox,
joining
coming
us.
and joining
absolutely,
Yeah,
of course. So anytime.
Bye.
So I guess to kind of transition away from that a little bit, I think that was a good discussion. One other large change that was made to a lot of the heroes in Overwatch 2 is the amount of CC that they provided. So I think a lot about, the one that comes to mind for me is Cassidy's flashbang.
Which
Which
CC.
I sorely miss.
I think
I'm alone in that though.
yeah, probably. Sorry. I started as a Tracer main, so I hated that thing.
My only line of defense was Tracers. There's a reason I had to learn how to play Cassidy.
Yeah. Me having to bait out one cooldown, and it basically dictated an entire fight.
Yep.
I think the initial handling of it was actually smart. The only thing I disagreed with a bit was, originally their philosophy was tanks are going to have CC abilities, DPS will not, and we're going to try not to give them to supporters, with the exceptions being Ana and Lucio, because they were fundamental to the kit, and they are. Them remaining the same way was good. With that said, I think this reversion, well, I think actually on Mei it has been fairly good. I don't think Mei has been as oppressive as she was in Overwatch 1.
She's still powerful, but it's not nearly as bad as she was.
But she's also had her up and down. I think
she
the last
has had her
time
up and down. But honestly, it's been a lot of the changes that they've made since they said, hey, we're going to give her this little bit of CC back. It's been them saying, actually, we're going to give her more CC. And it's been more problematic. And honestly, it's made her a lot worse. She's in a good spot right now where she can slow, and she can deal damage, but it's not, you're not unable to move. You still feel like you have the ability to play around her. You're not getting literally frozen in place. I think the redone grenade is absolutely ridiculous, and the fact that it's still in the game is
impressive.
It's the dumbest thing ever. It just attaches to everyone in a fucking 10-meter radius.
They changed. I mean, it's changed so much from that. It's a lot smaller now. I want to say it's
it is harder to hit. As someone who still plays Cassidy fairly often, still, it is.
You have to get it within 1 meter.
I just feel like every time I'm playing tank, I get fucking stuck with a goddamn sticky bomb, and it annoys the shit out of me.
So you do have a larger hitbox. So that's going to be number one.
I understand that. No, like, duh. But, like, I swear, I'd be, like, fucking forever away. Like, if I was Ryan and I was charging at someone, fucking McCree would be up top and just throw a sticky bomb, and somehow it would get me during my charge. It'd be frustrating.
And it's the type of ability that is awful to play against. And I think Sombra falls into this for sure as well. Where, what is the counterplay? It's like, if you're charging Ryan, you don't have counterplay. You have to either cancel your charge, which, if you're going to hit that at that point, why not just take the extra 120 damage or whatever it is? What is it now?
Too much.
I have no clue.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
For hitting a charge?
No, for hitting Cassie's grenade.
Sticky bomb.
Oh, it's not a lot.
It's not as much as it used to be.
Because they took away at first it was a completely damage base.
Yes,
pretty
and that
much
was
ability.
also broken for a whole different reason.
And then they changed it. It's the same way that they were kind of creeping up with May again. And how can we give her a little bit of her CC back? This was Cassidy's halfway point of like, because correct me if I'm wrong, the sticky grenade can stop a charging Rhine, right?
Stops it.
Which at that point I'm like, just give him the flashbang.
Yeah,
it's the same ability. It's the same thing.
And
quite honestly,
it only stops movement-based abilities.
Yep, and I get it. I think I'm a flashbang apologist. I think it had some good skill-based amount of play with it. I thought it was the satisfaction of canceling an ult. But if we're gonna move away from the fact that DPS just shouldn't have CC anyway, then just take it away from him. Rework him. Find him a new ability. When Overwatch switched to 5v5, we had to rework all these things anyway. A lot of these characters, more than just the ones that we can like see on the surface of like, we had to change Doomfist, we had to change Sombra, we had to change Bastion. Those things were apparent and needed to change when we went into 5v5. But there's things like Cassidy's abilities that like we should start looking at that. Like, what else can we rework? Because this game has fundamentally changed. And I thought that Paradox brought up a really interesting point of like the 5 roles, or the 3 different roles turning into more of a 5-role thing. I had never thought about that, but we already refer to things as flex support, main support, flex DPS, main DPS. I don't think that's used as much, but if we start transferring into that, maybe the game does find ways to heal itself in the way that there is better ability usage within those roles, if that makes sense.
I think I forgot to mention it while I was here, but it did cross my mind. We did have 4 roles at one point.
Did they? No,
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you have to queue for those, or was it?
No, because that was before roll queue, and the issues
that was before roll queue.
It was because roll queue came up because of the issues with the goats meta, which is a whole separate can of worms that we're not going to delve too much into. But for anybody who's unaware and listening to this, there was a particular meta where you would run 3 tanks and 3 supports. Originally, it was Reinhardt, Zarya, Diva, and Lucio, Moira, Brig.
Yeah,
it was a fun time.
It was a really fun comp to run, but it did become problematic where every game ended up becoming those 6 heroes facing off against each other, and there were a few variations that every once in a while would take on some popularity. I remember there was one where you swapped out a tank for Mei, one where you swapped out a tank for Sombra. I think there was one where you swapped out a tank for Doomfist, if I recall. But it was incredibly problematic and pervasive to the point where eventually Blizzard
you couldn't play anything else.
Make changes in order to make their DPS roster viable. Completely lost my train of thought and where I was making that point, but
offense or attacking, defending, 4 different roles.
Yeah, so those originally it was attack and defense. There was no DPS category. It was those 2 separate roles, and then they decided to combine them because they said, well, we have this stuff that's set up as attackers and we have this stuff set up as defenders, but people kind of just pick whatever they want. And there were a lot of things where it just kind of made sense. It's like, okay, Mei was classified as a defender, but worked great on offense. Being able to throw up a wall to stop your charging Ryan, because that was before he could cancel his charge, was great.
Because same thing with Symmetra.
Yep, yes. Symmetra got used on attack a lot because you could TP behind people, especially once bunker cops became a big thing. So it was one of those changes that got made, and it made a lot of sense. But now we're looking at it, and maybe that is a better way to go.
Well, I think it would just help you. I think it would maybe not solve problems. I think it would help people conceptualize what their role is within the game. I think it would lead to better comps. I think it would lead to less frustration of when you queue into a game and you have 4 random teammates and they're running Mercy Lucio ball and you kind of want to die.
You mean our server's normal game?
Correct. But like, let's say, for example, let's just say you implement flex support and main support. So now your flex supports are more of more utility based. your Kirikos, your Baptistes, your Moiras. I might not be getting the roles completely correct, but bear with me. So you have those three, and then in your main healer or main support area, you have your Mercies, your Briggs, your Lucios. Sure. You're gonna automatically create better comps just because you're picking from those pools. Where like maybe you don't want to mix a Mercy with a Lucio, but you could mix a Mercy with a Moira, a Bap, a Kiriko, and it'll work. It'll work really well. You'll have the utility there. So I think that would somewhat start to kind of more define what you're supposed to be doing in a game. But that's also what they moved away from when they just combined the entire DPS role back in the day. So
I think the other issue that comes up with that, if we still don't have a lot of supports. Like the truth of the matter is, like we have 10 supports right now?
sure.
Something like
I
that.
don't even know if it's quite
Close.
that many.
I'm not even sure.
I'm gonna go look it up really quick because I forgot to write on that.
What have we added 3 since Overwatch 2? I think we've been the biggest. Tied with Tank, I think. We've only had
because there's already 5 billion fucking
Correct.
DPS. So
Sojourn has been our only DPS
Well, a lot of
ad.
that also comes from the original philosophy, because when
Yeah.
Blizzard made the game, it wasn't balanced around 2-2-2, which is what role queue ended up being. It was balanced around 1-2-2-2 or 1-2-2-1. So it was 1 support, 1 tank, 2 attackers, 2 defenders. And then as the game progressed, they were finding that nobody was using that comp.
Dude, I still remember rolling into King's Row running 5 DPS back in the day. It was really fun.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You'd have the one Mercy that's like flying around everywhere, just like having a full-on panic attack. It was great.
I do
was
think
never
that
Mercy.
I do think that role queue was a healthy decision for the game.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it created some amount of order. I think of before role queue being more like the Wild West of everyone kind of did what they want and you never knew what kind of game you were going to load into, which was part of the fun some of the time. But that was also around the time that I started playing competitive on console. And trust me, I was a straight bronze player back then, so it did not matter. But it was like sometimes you'd roll into comp games and you'd have 4 teammates that'd be like, we're running all DPS. And you're like, you're not going to win. Yeah. Whereas now I feel like at least like with the role queue change, and I know we're going way back now. We're not even talking about Overwatch 2 at this point. But like with role queue, at least you had some order. And I feel like, I don't know.
A little bit more.
Also sort of why they kept like open queue, or I guess added it back in once they did role queue. And they made it competitive as well, so they could still have those crazy games of 5 DPS.
You all know my love for open queue.
Yeah.
I think open queue has its time and its place, and I'm glad that it exists. I really am, because it does let you go do those silly little things.
It gives you the fun of the game.
Yeah.
Yes, and I know that Nox watches Flats with me. I don't know if who else watches. The Emongs. Who else? CarQ. Big one.
J3 will do things every once in a while.
You watch all these streamers now, and
ML7.
I think it is ML7. Yep, can't forget him. I think it's really telling though that all of these streamers who, when we were watching Overwatch 1, these were the people that you went and watched to try and just learn how to play the game better. If you really wanted to understand what was going on, these were the people at the top. These were the people who were figuring things out and making big plays and constantly, showing you the best ways to play the game. CarQ in particular, I mean, his tutorials were how you learn so much, and he still does his Mythbuster videos, which are phenomenal. But the fact that none of them want to play comp anymore just shows you how sad a state the game is in. The truth of the matter is that it's no longer a competitive game. So much of it is not based around whether or not it's actually doable, because you can't play it anymore in the same way that you did.
In my opinion, and it's a little bit of a hot take.
Uh-oh.
I don't think Overwatch is fun anymore, especially if you want to win. It removes any aspect of enjoyment because now, hey, guess what? Bastion's meta. You have to play Bastion if you want to win. Good luck. And then you move on. Oh, who's the next person? Ramatra's meta. Good luck. Play him or you lose. So
And hopefully that you're better.
Yeah. Any kind of enjoyment you might have gotten, and as much as I dig on the rock, paper, scissors, there was at least some give and take there. I think it's just gone. There's nothing there for me anymore. I think the closest I've gotten was open queue. Because you could do whatever the fuck you wanted, and you could fuck around, and it wasn't serious, so you didn't have to care.
I also think Overwatch, Overwatch has always had the quick play. It's always been fun for different reasons, but I think a lot of the enjoyment, especially for, I would like to speak for the 3 others in this call, that ranked was fun. Ranked, it was fun to play with others. It was fun to grind and try to see how high you could get. And I still thoroughly believe that the problem with the ranked system was not the fact of what we saw in the numbers. It was how the MMR worked. And that's still a mystery to all of us. I think them changing the rank system how they have has been a massive disaster. Because the ranked is what kept me playing Overwatch for 6 years. I've come to the conclusion that the reason I was able to hyperfixate on this stupid game for 6 years is because I could watch that fun little number go up and down every season. And I could try to make it go higher every season. And now I'm getting an arbitrary color and number after 10 games, 7 games, whatever it is, 5 now. An arbitrary that tells me nothing about how I did. I reached my peak in this game. It's still my support. I was like Diamond 2. It was awesome, but it meant nothing because I had no idea how I got there. I had no record of how that number went up. I just watched an arbitrary rank change every 5 games if I was lucky. And it didn't feel rewarding anymore.
Even with that, when they did the whole like rank boost thing, I mean, like my account went from gold to fucking masters. And then I got thrown in masters games and I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? Like, this is not where I belong. This is not what I signed up for. And like even then trying to get back down because they fucked up the whole like system. Like, I mean, I wasn't trying to throw games, but I was practically throwing games because I can't play at a master's level or a grandmaster's level. So I'm just losing every game. And it took me like 6 months to get down to like a level that's appropriate for my tank. Right? Because and even then, you know, it's not even fun at that point because I was just losing all the damn time. Like, there was never a win until I lost 500 damn games to get down to a level that's in me. All because they just went, you know, we don't think everyone's ranks are right. We're just going to raise everyone up real quick.
You know, I find it funny that we've brought up the ranking system because I did actually completely forget. They changed rank this season, so now you get an update after every game.
Is it a number yet?
I don't have to.
I don't remember.
Is it a number that goes wee woo wee woo?
Look, you were not here for this yet when I talked about this the first time. I am not alone in the fact that the dopamine hits. Like, that's what it's designed to do.
I 100% agree. Overwatch 1, I would religiously play comp. I met y'all in the server and we would only play comp. I hated quick play. It was boring. It was not fun.
Because what were you playing for?
Exactly. You see the little number, and you know, every once in a while people get upset, like, oh, we lost that game, my rank went down. You know, whatever, it is what it is, right? But yeah, the old where it was just bronze, silver, you know, whatever, and you get to see your little number on the thing. It is a dopamine, and it's way more fun, and it wasn't as dreadful to get into a comp game.
I also think, like, I know Zach and I especially, Bandito not as much, Oreo a bit, we've been playing a lot of Apex. That came up a little bit. We've been playing a lot of Apex. Apex rank system is so broken. I think it is an awful ranked system, but do you want to know why I continue to play Apex ranked? Because in the top little corner of my game, every single game, I get to watch that -50 go up. I get to understand how that game is being impacted, how it's impacting my score. I get to see it in real time, and then when the game's over, they give me a little breakdown where they add all the points together, and I see if I'm negative or positive. And then I move on, and I go, okay, so here's what I need to do for the next game. It's instant feedback. It's constant. It is there, and even though the rank system itself, I think, is flawed and not a really good representation of who you are as an Apex player, it at least gives you what you want out of a ranked system that keeps you coming back and knowing what you need to do better next time.
Bandito's just over there laughing at my wee-woos.
A little bit. There's some judgment. However, I did find in my escapade of this game the best way to find enjoyment, which is both my downfall. As I mentioned right at the beginning, I live the Icarus tale. I have grown too close to the sun. I got what I wanted, but at what cost? We had minorly touched on earlier how I was silenced because Overwatch did not appreciate
Bandito,
Blizzard.
you're toxic.
You're very
Blizzard
toxic.
didn't appreciate how I talked to the enemy team. You see, I have found the best way to find enjoyment in this game after moving to Overwatch 2 is to degrade the enemy team into genuinely feeling bad about themselves. You get
Zach,
them
you know how to
start
edit,
feeling
right?
bad. Yes, it's wonderful. The amount of joy I feel when I know that I'm making someone genuinely think about the shit that's going on, it's delightful. Never had more joy. It doesn't matter how much joy, how much a win would give me. Doesn't matter. I got what I wanted. I may have been silenced for it, but by God, it was worth it.
Okay, but along with the whole, like, is Overwatch still fun thing, like...
I do want to start wrapping this up. So, my one last little topic that I want to just kind of touch on, and start pushing us towards is, so we've talked about, possibly going down to 3 players like Paradox said, or having more roles, changing the rank system so that there is meaning to your games instead of this just arbitrary thing that happens and doesn't feel like it actually is representative of your gameplay, whether that be positive or negative. What are actual good ways that the game could move forward?
Balance it right. Really, like, as simplistic as it is, it's like a lot of, because it's just like, especially with the new champs that are coming in, it's like they're bringing them in and they're like somewhat balanced for like higher ranked players, but for lower ranked players, it's just impossible to play against. Like, I was talking with Eric about this the other night. Like, it's like for bronze, silver, gold players, it's impossible to play against these new champs.
I almost feel like there'd be merit in slowing down the whole game. And just you don't have to go crazy. I know games these days are, Apex, it's, how fast can you fire off a mag and get your pick? Because once you get your knock, you're good. If you don't get the knock, then you're problematic. But, I think there's merit in Overwatch, in particular, to slowing it down and making sure that, the game should be tactical. It should be thinking about your positioning. And right now, it's less about that. And it's, if I can do what I need to do on BAP right here, right now, in this moment, that's it. You've won the match. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's gone 5v5, and you have to deal with the fact that your tank can't be 2 places at once.
To piggyback off of both of you, I think the balance does come into a lot of it. I think Zach brought it up earlier, less at raw numbers and more about how they play, and mixing that into the philosophy of how they balance, I think would be a great place to start. I also, kind of returning back to the thought on maybe more specialized roles or going down to 3, a thought that I had is the games that thrive at 3 people are games where the 3 people that are on a team do not differ that much from the other. Things like Apex, you have different characters, but at the base of the game, they all have 2 guns, and they have little special abilities that aid them, that work as utility. but they're three characters in the world. Think of Rocket League. They're just like, it's all, the three things are the base. Whereas Overwatch is more resembling something like League, where they all have special abilities and powers, where maybe you do have to move through. That's why I'm a proponent. I love the idea of maybe specializing the roles, because they are moving more towards a League where they have 1,000,005 things that they can do, and they are specialized in that. So I would love to see the devs look more into how each character plays around others, what comps they usually play in, how can you balance per that for every role, keeping the average player and the most skilled player in mind, and then also looking into how can they lean into that specialization. Do we need to rework more characters? Do we need to create more roles? What does that look like, and what needs to give in order to make this what it used to be, in that you have a roster of 40 characters that can all do different things, and that's what makes the game so cool. But how can we exploit that to a point where that makes it fun again, not oppressive?
Anyone else have any thoughts?
I despise the game. You probably don't want mine. I think they should burn it to the ground and move on. I think they'll have other properties that deserve some attention.
I think if that happened, you'd be sad.
A little bit, yes, but
I think it is sad.
well.
I think it is genuinely sad for one reason and one reason alone.
Mhm.
If Overwatch 1 was back tomorrow, we would all gladly hop on and play.
Absolutely.
Because the game was not perfect. But my god, it was fun. We'd do it even just for quick play. Because you knew what you could do. You knew all the things you could do. You didn't have to worry about all these 25 different problems that we've talked about today. You just got to go into a game and actually just have fun. All right, thanks everyone for joining us. Hoping that you enjoyed our discussion today. We'll be releasing these episodes bi-weekly, ish. We're really going to try and aim for that. But if that's not often enough for you, we're available at the Snowflake Sanctuary Discord server. If you want to offer your own insight, if you have any ideas for what you want to hear, or you think we just sound like a cool group of people to chill with, God bless your soul, click the link in the description and we'll get you going. Thanks again, Bandito. Thank you, Paradox, for ditching out early. Thank you, Oreo, for hopping in when you did. And thank you to everyone for listening to us, and hope to see you in the next one. Bye.